This week we tried to resaw without a bandsaw, lose power in our shop, and try to turn a scrap piece of wood into fancy high-end furniture. I don't know if you would call it that, but it will be a coffee table. If you liked our last slab project, link on the screen, then you might have noticed that piece we cut off, and you even might have asked yourself,
what about second breakfast?
Well, today we have you covered. I went ahead and used an electric hand plane to get a flat surface on that rough cutoff piece. At this point, I had already flattened the board, so I just needed to get the end or the side, whatever you want to call it, flat so I could run it through my table saw. I made sure to take multiple passes on the table saw, as this kind of seemed like a sketchy idea, so determine your own level of comfort when doing something like this. One good thing about having a lack of sometimes, it requires you to get creative. Sometimes that creativity is just a dead end, like me trying to use a pull saw here to finish cutting this board in half. But sometimes creativity is found in your wife telling you to stop being lazy and go to the store to get a larger saw blade for your reciprocator saw, so you don't waste all day trying to hand saw a slab in half. Thankfully, once the slabs were cut in half, each piece was small enough to run through my thickness planer, saving me from the dreaded router sled for now. Prep for getting ready to pour epoxy is always the same. We clean the slab, seal the wood, and make a mold. Sealing the wood step isn't always necessary, but we're working with slow cure epoxy and a very strong black dye, so it's needed for us, and we did an okay job at sealing this table. One thing we seem to always do right with these builds is the epoxy mold itself. We have never had a leak with multiple pours. I think going the sheathing tape route is the best way to make the molds. I have never used mold release, but I've seen multiple examples of it going horribly wrong. Like I mentioned earlier, we lost power.
Let's hope we don't lose power, otherwise we have to open the garage. Oh, son of a... Okay.
No! This is not the time to lose power. Where's my brush? It's back. Thankfully, it was only for a moment, and we were able to finish our pour before losing power again. We had a lot of air bubbles in this epoxy due to us using a large mixing paddle in a smaller bucket. We went ahead and used our heat gun to pop all those little bubbles. This is my most favorite part of these builds. Popping the epoxy out of the mold is always the most satisfying part to me. We put the pieces that we knew were going to be the top of the table face down into the mold, with the hope that we wouldn't get any epoxy on the top of the table, but that didn't happen. And that brings me to one of my least favorite parts, the router sled. Learn a lesson from me. Don't buy a cheap surfacing bit if you plan to flatten a lot of tables. Unless you like to spend hours sanding to remove burn marks, it just does not save you enough money over time.
That stuff hurts. It stops you from living up to your potential. It holds you back. It hurts the user.
Tell a friend. I've noticed that in my first videos, I don't really talk much about the design of the pieces I'm making. So let's go ahead and talk about that a little bit. Right now, I'm really into designing things that have a shape to them. I mean, everything has a shape, but I think you know what I mean. I'm really drawn towards curves and round edges, as you'll see in this table. The table was thinner than I wanted, so I decided to use pretty much all the leftover epoxy I had to add some thickness, and this plywood would help be a filler. And as an extra bonus, it allows me to drill and insert the table leg inserts into wood rather than epoxy, which is always a little nerve-wracking. This little happy accident, out of nowhere idea is definitely going to be carried over in the future, as I do not like to drill into epoxy. I didn't have much epoxy left in my stock at the time, so I had to use tabletop epoxy to finish this, which required me to do multiple pours over 3 days. At this time in the build, we discovered how much we didn't like the main epoxy slab table that we were making. I'm very glad I added extra thickness to this table because I decided to take off as much material as I could, as we realized how much staining we had from the black dye that we used in the epoxy. The first time I flattened the slab, I thought it was amazing. Why would anyone pay somebody else to do this? Then that feeling quickly wears off the next time you have to flatten a slab. It's hours of work, plus probably the worst part and why I hate it the most, the cleanup and the dust it creates And unfortunately, I'm not a clean as you go type of person. I'm more a make a disaster, then come back later and spend hours cleaning. Like I said already, I love me a good round over, especially in this case. I got the thickness that I wanted in the table, and also I was able to kind of disguise, hide, however you want to call it, that I was working with a slab that was only half the thickness of the table. Now, before I can continue, I need to stabilize the wood in this spalted maple. Any spalted wood is the result of a natural decay of the wood, which creates these black lines throughout the wood, which gives the wood a lot of character. But that process also adds soft spots to wood. So we need to use something to harden the wood. And in this case, we're going to use deep pour epoxy. Sanding off the epoxy is a slow process. If you watched any of our past videos, you might have heard me say, I'm paranoid. So I went ahead and added a little bit of thin CA glue to try and hit any soft wood I might have missed. And lucky me, that leads me right back to sanding. I'm very happy that on this build, I didn't have any air bubbles to have to fill. So I went ahead and sanded off the glue and worked myself up to 240 grit. With the finish we're using, you have to water pop the grain on the wood between grits, or at least before the final grit. We figured out the position we wanted the table legs, double checked our measurements, and started the process of drilling holes and countersinking them. I like to add a little bit of glue to the inserts before adding them. I don't know if this gives them any more strength, but I like to think they do.
And I'm optimistic because every day I get a little more desperate.
One of the best among many pieces of advice that I've learned from watching Blacktail Studios videos is cover your piece with some painter's plastic to avoid any warping or cupping of the wood between downtime. I went ahead and used some Rubio Monocoat Pre-Color Easy Intense Black on the bottom of this table to kind of help hide, mask, blend the plywood to make it just not so noticeable. Once the stain was dry, I could go ahead and add the first coat of Rubio Monocoat and Pure to the top and bottom of the table. After 48 hours, we went ahead and sanded the surface with a maroon pad. This helps to even out the sheen and fix any sanding patterns that I might have left in the epoxy. I won't lie, this step is a bit of a pain when you have to do it, as it takes a few hours to complete. Once done, you can add that final coat of Rubio and be extremely happy that you took the extra time to produce the best product you can. But after a month of work on this table, it's done. But wait, why not add an extra step? I ordered some of Blacktail Studios Nano Finish to see how good it is and to give myself a little bit more work. And also I want to make the highest quality product that I can, so if this helps, all the better. But now I'm done for real. Getting to this point is very gratifying. All the work, all the mistakes are worth it in the end. You learn some, you cry some, you act like the world is ending when you do projects like this. That can't just be me. If you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. If you aren't already subscribed, please do so. And go ahead and like the video if you don't mind. Leave a comment letting us know what you guys think of these legs. And it's now time to move to the best part of making furniture, trying to find somebody to buy it.
I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Man, I love being a turtle.